Did you know there once was a beer called Watney's Red Barrel? This brew is so iconic that it defined an entire generation of pub nights in Britain before vanishing from the taps like a forgotten friend. In this video, I'll show you 5 classic beers from the UK, along with a couple mentions that were not only cult favorites but today are real rarities, and what their disappearance tells us about our changing tastes, our lost breweries, and the very fabric of our drinking culture. If you remember sipping these at the local after a long week, or cracking one open with mates during a big match, then hit the like button and subscribe, and let's take a trip back through time together. There was a time when you couldn't walk into a pub without seeing a bright red pump proudly pouring Watney's Red Barrel. Brewed by Watney, Combe and Reed in London, this beer became the poster child of British keg ale in the 1960s and 70s. It wasn't just a drink, it was a sign that beer was going modern. First introduced in the 1930s, Red Barrel really took off after World War II. It was one of the first British beers to be pasteurized and kegged, allowing it to travel further and stay fresher longer. That meant it could be served in working men's clubs, canteens, and seaside resorts without the fuss of cellaring. In doing so, it became a national brand, something few beers achieved in that era. As for the taste, well, opinions vary. It was malty, slightly sweet, with a smooth, almost flat mouthfeel. Designed for consistency rather than character, it was mild and inoffensive, easy drinking for the working man after a shift, or for couples enjoying a dance hall evening. It wasn't designed to challenge you. It was designed to comfort you. Its Red Barrel logo was iconic and the adverts cheeky. Whether you were in Manchester or Margate, chances are someone you knew was drinking a pint of Red Barrel, maybe your dad, your uncle, or even you. It became part of Britain's new industrial identity, sleek, uniform, dependable. But as time passed, the very things that made Red Barrel successful became its downfall. Keg beer faced backlash from traditionalists. In 1971, CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ale, formed specifically to fight back against beers like it. People began to crave character and craftsmanship, not convenience. By the late 70s, Red Barrel was being phased out, replaced by Watney's Special, a reformulated version trying to win back public favor. It never quite did. Eventually, it disappeared from pubs altogether, remembered mostly by those who lived through its heyday. And yet, for many, the sight of that Red Barrel brings back memories. Smoky pubs, vinyl booths, laughing with friends under fluorescent lights. It was never the fanciest pint, but it was reliable, familiar, a piece of the past you could hold in your hand. A double diamond works wonders. If you were watching telly in the 60s or 70s, chances are you heard that jingle more than once. It was brewed in Burton-upon-Trent by Allsops, later called Ind Coupe, and the Double Diamond Burton Pale Ale was once one of the UK's best-selling beers. It first appeared in the late 19th century and soon became pretty common in keg form by around the 1950s. It had a light amber body with low bitterness and soft carbonation, so it was easy on the palate. It was a pale ale in name, but was actually something in between because of the sweet, smooth, and slightly buttery taste, which made it popular for a wide audience from pub goers to banquet diners. Double Diamond found its niche with the urban professional crowd, but it was just as likely to be found in working men's clubs and suburban lounges. It was the pint of the aspirational everyman, the guy who'd done his shift, put on a clean shirt, and fancied a night out. You didn't chug a Double Diamond, you sipped it with pride. The advertising was a huge part of its success, bold, catchy, memorable. It made the beer feel modern, cosmopolitan even. You could imagine it being poured in pubs across the UK, from Liverpool to London. And yet, for all its branding power, its true charm was in how everyday and accessible it felt. As Britain entered the 80s, though, Double Diamond began to lose ground. Tastes were changing. The rise of lager and the resurgence of cask ales pushed beers like Double Diamond out of the spotlight. The very thing that made it successful, its safe, smooth profile, now seemed bland. By the 2000s, the beer was only available in select pubs, and eventually it faded from shelves and bars entirely. While a revival attempt came in later years in 2025 by Kirkstall Brewery, the original experience was lost. But for many, just the sound of that slogan brings it all back. The smell of cigarette smoke on wool coats, the fizz of a jukebox, the comforting clink of pint glasses in a corner snug. Double Diamond didn't just work wonders, it worked its way into the soul of a generation. If you grew up in Sussex or Surrey, chances are you've heard the name King and Barnes. And if you ever had the pleasure of sipping their old ale, you'll remember it wasn't just a beer. It was like a warm, rich hug from home. The ale was brewed in Horsham, and it was full-bodied and dark with a strong following. It had a deep chestnut color with notes of treacle, toasted malt, and a gentle roast bitterness. It was slightly sweet, but never cloying, with a dry finish that made it feel both indulgent and balanced. This was the kind of beer you'd drink nice and slow. It appealed to the locals first and foremost, especially older drinkers, pub regulars, and those who appreciated traditional English brewing. This was not a flashy beer. It was honest and comforting, perfect for the quiet pub corner, or those slow Sunday afternoons after a walk through the South Downs. It was often paired with simple things like a plate of pork pies, a log fire, and a good chat. King and Barnes was a family-owned brewery with roots going back to the 1800s, and they really took pride in their beer. The old ale really became a cornerstone of the Horsham community. But like many regional breweries, King and Barnes couldn't survive the tide of consolidation. In 2000, it was sold to Hall and Woodhouse, and the original Horsham brewery was shut down. Old ale was gone, just like that. Although other beers bore similar names afterward, it just never tasted the same for locals. For many in the south of England, this was more than the loss of a beer. It was the disappearance of a cultural landmark, a quiet anchor in a rapidly changing world. Even now, former fans remember it in vivid detail. The smooth pour, the rich aroma, the comforting taste that felt like home in a pint glass. Today, if you ask someone from Horsham about King and Barnes Old Ale, you might see a smile, tinged with a bit of sadness. Because some beers don't just disappear from pubs, they disappear from our everyday rituals and from the landscape of memory. Stone's Bitter wasn't just a beer, rather it was like a badge of honor for the people of Sheffield and the working-class North. Brewed at the Cannon Brewery in the heart of the city since 1948, it became a symbol of grit, pride, and community, rising to national fame in the 70s and 80s. This was a beer for miners, metalworkers, and everyday blokes who'd earned their pint. Stone's was a golden, bitter, clean and slightly dry, with a subtle malty backbone and a gentle hop finish. It had just enough flavor to feel satisfying without ever overwhelming. It was made to be drunk in rounds, pint after pint, while the laughter flowed and the darts flew. You didn't order Stone's to show off. You ordered it because you knew it and it knew you. It was the pint your dad drank, the beer that lived on every bar in South Yorkshire. It found its way into corner pubs, clubhouses, sports halls, even canteens and working men's clubs, where it stood as a humble reward at the end of a long, honest day. At its peak in the 1980s, Stone's Bitter was sold all across the UK, thanks to its acquisition by Bass. It was even one of the top-selling bitters in the country, but the more it grew, the more it began to lose touch with its roots. Production moved, ownership changed, the taste shifted, and locals noticed. By the 2000s, the decline was clear. Sheffield's Cannon Brewery closed in 1999, and though the brand limped on under new brewers, the original cask version was discontinued by 2011. What remained was a pale imitation of what once was, available in cans, but stripped of its soul. For generations, Whitbread Pale Ale was the quiet pint that showed up when you needed it most. Not flashy, not heavy, but dependable, and part of daily life for many working-class families across Britain. Brewed by Whitbread, one of the biggest names in British brewing, it became a staple in pubs and homes alike from the mid-20th century through to the 1980s. Whitbread Pale Ale had a light golden hue with a crisp, mildly malty flavor and just a touch of bitterness. It was what many would call a session beer today, easy drinking, subtle and refreshing. This was the beer you'd drink with your dad on a Saturday afternoon while fixing the garden shed. It was what turned up in those light and bitter mixes ordered at the pub by uncles and neighbors. And it had a huge bottled presence too, lining shop shelves, tucked into kitchen cupboards, served at weddings and family get-togethers. For many, Whitbread Pale Ale wasn't a treat, it was routine. It was part of the everyday rhythm, a cold bottle after mowing the lawn, a quiet pint at the corner pub, a clink of glasses over a long lunch at the factory canteen. But, like many classics, its simplicity was eventually its undoing. As the 80s rolled on, drinking culture changed. People wanted stronger, bolder flavors, or went the other direction with flashy lagers. Bottled pale ales began to feel old-fashioned. Whitbread itself was eventually taken over in the wave of consolidations, and the pale ale was quietly discontinued, vanishing without fanfare. And yet, ask anyone who remembers it, and they'll speak of it fondly. It was part of the background music of life, not the headline act, but all the more cherished because of it. Whitbread Pale Ale was the quiet friend you could rely on. And its absence today feels like a symbol of how much simpler, slower times have slipped away. While they didn't get their full spotlight today, these lost legends deserve a mention. Courage Imperial Russian Stout, once brewed for the Tsars, gone by the 1990s. Charrington Toby Ale, known for its classic Toby jug label, once a London icon. Younger's No. 3, a Scottish strong ale, robust and quietly retired. Whitbread Light Ale, a lunchtime staple, often paired with a bitter in pubs. And that's it for today's trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed this nostalgic pint with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own memories in the comments. Cheers, and we'll see you next round.